Sure, we are live here. A little bit impromptu. Oh, let me make my announcement about it. Okay, I'm showing live on Twitch. Cool. All right, so hello everyone. A little bit impromptu, but I had talked about previously wanting to do at least one lecture before the year is over, so it's a good time to at least get one of these done. So this one, as with a few, it's going to be a little bit broad. Generally speaking, what we're talking about is WA clan organization systems. To be clear, we're talking about systems that we have used at various points in the past, or that we're even considering. As I've talked about a little bit on Fireside, we're talking about just kind of adjusting slightly how the platoon duties and leadership structure kind of works, basically. Not anything as drastic as has happened with previous changes between different eras, for example. But in kind of getting into that, and my apologies if this winds up being a bit disorganized and such, I haven't planned it out in great detail. I kind of just have an idea of some of the material that I want to cover here. So, yeah, let's just get started. I think that'll kind of make it clear what exactly we're talking about as well. So, comparing clan organization systems. Okay, so what exactly does that mean? Well, fundamentally, in WA, what we pretty much always have is the leader of the clan at the top, and then maybe you have we'll call this just administration. Basically, is this a council, or whether it be a council or one second in command or some kind of intermediate structure? This I'm gonna put some hyphens here because this is not always there um, at different points in WA history. And then we have what I'd kind of call, let's just say officers. That's generally going to cover all of our bases. And then we generally have enlisted. So where does that leave us? So, well, if you look at WA right now, we're talking Fleet Admiral, me. And we do have administration right now. This is the Admiralty. So that includes Admiral, Vice Admiral, Rear Admiral, and we don't currently have a Commodore, but we had for some time. And then what are the officers? Well, this would be Captain. Technically speaking, this is Captain all the way through Chief Petty Officer. Um, Now, it's definitely worth noting that this is not always the case. Sometimes we're talking about captain through warrant officer because we use the term CO or commissioned officer to refer to these ranks, and then NCO, non-commissioned officer, to refer to Master Chief Petty Officer and Chief Petty Officer. But for the sake of this, don't have a lot of memory on the Control Z, do we? Notepad. For the sake of this lecture, we'll just say this, and then here, this will just be, we'll say recruit through. That doesn't make much sense. I'm kind of going in reverse here. Does. We'll say master gun through recruit. Okay. So this is basically how WA is structured right now in terms of ranks, right? But what I'm kind of talking about is, okay, beyond that, how is the clan divided up, right? So these are our ranks. Okay, great. But how is the clan divided up? Now you ask different people, and they might have different answers for you, even currently. And actually, that very kind of problem is something that we've talked about and why we want to adjust a little bit how platoons work. But if you were to ask people how the clan is divided up, probably the most logical thing people would say is houses, right? And then maybe some people would say families too. So if I were to write out my name, without any INR title, Westborger Leitling, right? Leitling being my family. So we could say family Leitling. Now this is starting to look like a roll call, right? House Deputy. So everyone in the clan has this, right? So logically speaking, the clan is divided up into houses, which are then divided up into families. Pretty logical, right? So what exactly is a house? What is a family? Well, they're units of lineage, but they do have leaders, right? So house is led by a lord or lady. Family is led by an earl or a countess. So in practice, what does that mean? Well, mostly these positions are somewhat ceremonial, but there are different, if a house or even a family wants to run a certain event, kind of in honor of their house or family, or maybe they want to start up some tradition. Something you might notice is a lot of people in House Serendipity have avatars that have a colored border around them. And then Discord added that feature built in, which sort of messed with it a bit, but even so. Having that avatar, that colored border around your avatar in WA represents having a relic. So running these traditions or house events tends to be something that the leaders of houses and families have to do, that lords and ladies and earls and countesses, excuse me, have to do. I say have to, but many do not, because really they are just for fun, essentially. I mean, I hesitate to use that phrase because they are really beneficial for just kind of sort of I can't think of a good way to phrase it, but to make the house and family more real to the average member, to remind them that they exist and to have them actually have more power, basically, rather than just be some vague thing that exists that nobody knows about. So they actually are quite important, not necessarily just for fun to do this stuff, but it can be a challenge to get people to do it. And that very thing is kind of something that I want to talk about next. So we talked about these are the responsibilities of a lord, lady, earl, or countess, right? So what happens if they don't do it? Nothing, basically. I mean, you can be removed from your position, right? Now, the vice admiral is generally in charge of houses and families. So you could say, if we were to kind of copy what we did up here, right? We could say the vice admiral in charge of houses that are in charge of family. In fact, it would be better to say so. That'd be a pretty logical way to structure it, right? So technically speaking, what you might say you have here is a sort of chain of command. That phrase is thrown around a lot in WA. But is that actually the case is a question. Debatable, but I would say kind of no. Why exactly? Because basically, because houses and families are units of lineage, we're really kind of stuck in those, right? As far as, everyone is stuck in their house and family. Yes, if you're crude enough, you can make your own family, and then eventually that could become its own house. That's very, very rare occurrence. Huge event if it does happen. But in practice, you're kind of stuck in your house and family, right? So that's a bit of a problem. Because let's say you have a house or a family that has 2 people in it. Okay, well, somebody has to be in charge of it, right? Okay, so we appoint a lord, we appoint an earl, or something like that. But what if they don't do any of this stuff, which I mentioned is not required, but is extremely important? Well, then that house or family essentially ceases to exist in the minds of people, which is as close as you can get to ceasing to exist as you can without somebody actually just deleting the house, right? So that's quite bad. Um, but what can the vice admiral do here if this house only has two people? Well, he could remove the lord or lady, and then they're just left leaderless. And what does that do? Well, nothing, basically. I mean, then we're still back at square one because that house and family has nothing going on. There's no traditions, activity is low, number of people in it is low. So what can be done? Well, nothing really, because the pool of candidates for these roles is limited to the people in that house or in that family. So if that pool is very small, then chances are that you will either have nobody to fill these roles or the people filling them will not be able to do a very good job, right? Unless you're extraordinarily lucky. And really, another duty of these lords, ladies, and earls and countesses is health and recruitment for their house or family. And not everyone's going to be a whiz recruiter. That's fine. But technically, if you are the guardian of your house or family, then this is something that you need to be concerned about. And traditions kind of play into the health because people stick around when you do cool stuff. That's really how simple it is. So if you're in charge of a house or family, then you should be considering health and recruitment, prioritizing health and recruitment of your house. So trying to grow those numbers. So if you only have two people in your house and one of them is the Lord and they are doing a fantastic job, why do you still have two people in your house? Is the logical question. Really, you should be trying to grow it. And sometimes there's lots of different factors. This isn't a call out to somebody or anybody. Not everyone can recruit or will recruit. That's fine. But if we're just talking about what we're talking about here, which is the house and family system overall, I mean, really, we're talking about clan organization systems, right? And I haven't really even gotten into what I'm really trying to get to here, but this is really important to address because for most people, again, when you ask them, what is WA, how is it divided up, they'll probably say this, which isn't wrong, but it's part of the answer, right? Just part. So the vice admiral is in charge of these roles, right? And I've talked about how because we're locked with that lineage, right? There's not really a lot of options here. It's pretty much just a game of chance because these roles are limited to, okay, Lord and Lady has to be somebody in the house. That's in House Dippity. The Lord of House Dippity or Lady of House Dippity would have to be somebody in House Dippity. The Lord of House Dane or the Lady of House Dane have to be somebody in House Dane. So on, so on. House Kilroy, House Commander, etc. Now, if your house has tons of people, maybe that's fine because maybe if the person is not doing their job, then the vice admiral can remove them and put somebody else in charge. And that sort of threat of removal can spur somebody or can kind of create better results because there is the pressure to actually do this stuff. Right. But again, you are always going to be somewhat limited because we're talking about lineage, right? Lineage. That's what these are, lineage. So you're just going to be limited in terms of who or what you can excuse me, I lost my train of thought. Who you can put in these roles. You're limited in candidates. Your candidate pool is small. Your candidate pool is limited to the number of people in the house or family, which is an issue. Now, that's kind of part of how this works, right? Because if we think of like a typical, monarchy kind of thing, uh, you know, succession, etc. Um, you know, we're talking about heirs and so on. So usually the lord, lady might have prince, princess who succeeds them, who's kind of their designated heir. This has been a bit of an iffy rank in WA. In practice, some people have just been designated as this role. What it actually originally tended to be was that the prince or princess was the sort of firstborn recruit of the lord or lady. And they would then go around calling themselves, I'm the prince or the princess because I am, the descendant. So literally, the person who would succeed the lord or lady was their recruit. So in that sense, the pool for this position is even smaller. It's basically one person. It's basically whoever they recruited. But what if they didn't recruit anybody? Okay, well then we have to expand the pool to the whole house and figure something out, right? But generally speaking, that even limited it more. Now, in the current times, generally speaking, the prince or princess is actually just anybody in the house who has been designated as the heir and kind of second in command of the house. So that's actually quite different from how it used to be. But that's kind of how it works now, and it's one of the things we've done to sort of combat the limits, the limited candidate pool for these positions. Is we say, okay, instead of just only the chosen recruit of the lord or lady, the prince or princess can be anybody in the house that they have designated as their heir, even if they aren't directly related in terms of lineage. They are designated as their heir, right? So that expands the pool for these two positions to anybody in the house. So for larger houses, that's quite a large pool of candidates. So chances are you've now got sort of two tries, right? Two attempts to win the lottery between these two. Plus, technically, the vice admiral couldn't just pick additional people to replace them if there are any such candidates. So what we tried to do with that, I think, is sort of expand the possible pool of candidates to try to get the best possible lords and ladies and princes and princesses who are thinking about these things and doing them and doing a good job, right? And there's other things too. I mean, you can talk about lineage charts. That's something that usually gets thrown around. Every house should have an updated lineage chart. Again, going back to cool things keep people around. Lineage charts are a cool thing. People can find themselves on it. They can understand their lineage, trace it all the way back to the founder of their house. It's something that looks cool. It makes them feel more a part of the house and family. And again, it makes it feel more real and powerful to people. So, important stuff, again. Okay. So, that's really how houses and families work, right? But I've talked about now some of the pitfalls of that. So, in the past, WA has discussed being organized only by houses and families, which we are not currently, by the way. Why not? Well, because we have all of our ranks, right? It'd be a lot easier to just copy and paste this, but let's just test my memory. Let's see if I can just get through everything. And not miss any. Let's just use some abbreviations. We better type them out just for clarity's sake, right? Let's get everything. So, even though some people might have said, oh, we're organized by houses and families, right? Then I throw these before them, and they're like, well, those are the ranks, right? Okay. But we have these, and we have these. So what's going on there? Well, essentially, that is sort of the core of WA, is two systems. We have houses, lineage, and then we have what you might just call the chain of command. So you've got houses and lineage. That's everything I was just talking about. That's all this stuff, right? Houses, families. You go into the family of the person who recruited you, and there you go into the house of the person who recruited you. You're stuck there forever. etc. Yeah, you can make your own house, but it's going to be branching off from your previous house, etc. So what these are sort of the regular ranks. So let's say we're promoting somebody to Master Chief by the officer. Well, who can reach this rank? Well, anybody in the clan. So this is really the key difference. Who can be an earl or a countess? Only the people in that family are eligible. We've even expanded this, but we're still limited here. Only the people in a house can hold these ranks. Or, excuse me, these are usually called nobility titles. Let's put that down, because that's usually the language we use. Nobility titles is what these are. They aren't ranks. They're titles. They are mostly ceremonial. They do come with some responsibilities, but these are not have to do. These are more just like important things to do if you want to do a good job in your role here, right? But these are ranks, and these are the chain of command. So, but we're in a bit of a weird spot here, because if I said, okay, what do these correspond to? You'd say houses and families. Lords and lady in charge of a house. Earls and countesses in charge of a family. What is a captain in charge of? Well, that very question, which doesn't have a clear answer right now, is sort of the exact reason that we are talking about trying to make platoons a bit stronger. So we can add here, platoons. So actually, what we have right now in practice is you have, let's just say, leadership. Actually, the most accurate thing would be to put admiralty, divisions, platoons. And this is the chain of command, if I can spell. The chain of command. Admiralty, divisions, platoons, right? So that is the second component here. So essentially, this is what WA has had for nearly 20 years, about 18-ish years, is some type of system like this, where you have everyone is part of a house and a family. That's their lineage. They're stuck there. That's the same. And they also have a rank in the chain of command, a rank and a location. Oh boy, I resized the window. It's going to mess everything up, isn't it? That's not what I intended. Sorry about that. That looks pretty good. Okay. So essentially what you're talking about here, this is actually supposed to be the more important part of the clan, because, like I said, anybody can hold any of these ranks. So it's purely a merit-based system. If you do your job and you meet the rank requirements, you get promoted up the chain of command. You go on up, going up, going up. So anybody can hold any of these ranks. So the pool of candidates for these ranks is the size of the entire clan, generally speaking. And you can be demoted. And because we aren't really limited for most of these ranks, there's nothing to stop us from demoting people who are doing a poor job or not meeting the requirements of the rank. So that's really this meritocracy, the merit-based system that the chain of command is built upon. But there is a crucial component that is not missing, but quite faded away to the background, and that is platoons, right? So this is how we technically work right now. But really what this is the Third Fleet system. And it was also used at different times, but I'm just calling it Third Fleet system in practice because that was the era of WA that I joined in. So to me, it's always going to feel like Third Fleet. Even though we had a very similar system throughout almost all of the Second Empire era, very similar system in the First Empire era, replace this with like the Imperial Command or Council or different things at different times. But essentially what you're talking about is you have the leadership of the clan. Then you have divisions, which each one contains multiple platoons. Quite simple. But of course, when you consider that we have these two different systems of organization, not so simple, but quintessentially WA. Okay. So with that in mind, What we are talking about is making platoons uh, more of a thing, to put it one way. So many people don't actually know platoons even exist right now, because how it works right now is a platoon is one or two WA people keeping track of things on a game, running events or writing reports on that game. So it would probably make more sense to call what we have right now not really platoons, but more like well, let's take some Warhammer 40,000 knowledge here. It's more like we have commissars or something similar. Maybe overseer. That's a word that even somebody who doesn't know 40,000 should be familiar with. So essentially, what you have here are one or two people overseeing things on that game. So it's not really a platoon, right? It's more like just the people in charge of it. Now, we use the term platoon because I think ideally we wanted to be closer to this Third Fleet thing. It was a word that's been used in WA in the past to correspond to individual games. So, can't think of a good way to phrase that, but each platoon being assigned to a certain game, right? That's how it works in the Third Fleet. We had, and if it was a really popular game like StarCraft, we might have a whole StarCraft division with multiple different platoons. And those could be for different purposes, like, say, casual platoon and a competitive one, or in the case of StarCraft, we had one platoon that was mostly focused on playing the default mode, if you will, melee. Another one that was focused on certain types of because in StarCraft you had lots of different game modes essentially that were basically you could just make your own game mode. I mean, the customization was insane. So we had one mode that was or one platoon, excuse me, that was chiefly for Lord of the Rings and diplomacy, kind of like Risk sort of style game modes. And another one that was for the default melee one. Another one that was for basically everything else. And we had additional StarCraft platoons over the years, and sometimes other games got big enough to have their own divisions composed of multiple platoons. What is the point of having a division? Well, if a platoon gets big enough and there's a reason to divide up the game into multiple platoons, that's kind of the purpose of division when we're talking about Third Fleet. Now, right now, our divisions are actually composed of multiple platoons. We don't have any games that are so big that we have multiple platoons. We have lots of different games that are all established as platoons. So each of our divisions contains multiple platoons. So each of our divisions contains multiple different games. Not multiple platoons for one game, but multiple different games. That's how it works right now. So what we're really doing with our divisions right now is creating a system of overseeing platoons. So you have that oversight, you have somebody in charge of multiple platoons, keeping track of them, keeping track of who's running them, kind of monitoring them, seeing if they're doing a good job, closing or opening or reopening different platoons. That's what divisions essentially do. They are units that contain multiple platoons each. So are divisions unnecessary? You could argue that they are, and then simply say, well, the Admiralty should just be in charge of doing this. But what having divisions actually does in practice is it means that there is that sort of middle management. It's not exactly the right phrase, but there is kind of that middle tier of leadership who are in charge of all those platoons and able to kind of manage things on sort of a game basis and a day-to-day level, instead of the Admiralty being in charge of handling that kind of thing and leaving the Admiralty free to do other stuff, and so on. It also kind of creates more of a uh, I guess you could call it a training ground for future members of the Admiralty. Because if you're leading a platoon, you're really focused on the game and the people playing it and kind of that. But if you're leading a division, you're basically in charge of platoon leaders. So you get experience then with seeing how multiple different platoons are running and making sure that they're all running smoothly, that their leaders are doing their jobs, that everyone is doing their jobs. So you get a lot of practice with managing people. So that's much more of a better funnel into the Admiralty here. Much better training for eventually joining the Admiralty. Okay. So what you have here then is you have platoons, as we call them, but not exactly. Because how they worked in the Third Fleet is that everyone, let's put Third Fleet here to be clear. Everyone, the Third Fleet era, so let's even put a date here for WA history noobs. So Third Fleet, we're talking about approximately 2008 to 2010. Everyone was in a platoon. Generally speaking, with a couple of vague exceptions, but generally speaking, everyone was in a platoon. So basically, if you played StarCraft, you were in one of the StarCraft platoons. If you played Xbox, you were in the Xbox platoon or division. If you played World of Tanks, you're in the World of Tanks division. And so on. So everyone was in one. But there is a problem that appeared, or that began to appear. So StarCraft dying, Discord, people playing lots of games at once. People don't necessarily have a main game, and even if they do, it might not be the main game for long. So this became a problem, everyone being in a platoon, because, okay, I was in the World of Tanks platoon for a month. I don't really play anymore. So it's like, okay, well, we can transfer you to a new platoon. It's like, okay, you got to apply for that or something. You have to clear it with a different leadership. It becomes a big pain. And it is still a problem that we've been discussing as far as some of the platoon updates we want to run out. Roll out, excuse me. So these problems appeared. When did they appear? I would say around 2013 to 2017. Very broad date range, but this is when these problems really, I think, came to the forefront, because we didn't have StarCraft, which was just our home base. So before it was like, yeah, we have an Xbox division, we have a PlayStation division, and so on, but those exist as people from StarCraft going out and starting them and running them. That's what they exist as. So it doesn't really mean a whole lot if they fail, because StarCraft is always there. But now StarCraft is dying. The core is dying. Yes, StarCraft 2 was out, but it, at least early on, it didn't hit the way StarCraft Brood War did, at least not for us. I think part of it was the custom map functionality being so limited at that point. So really, it was a big issue. So Discord, this was 2016, I believe. Yeah, 2016 that the WA Discord server was made by Solios, the Hand of the Ice. So Solios created the WA Discord, and he and I worked on it over the years, and eventually it became what you're using right now, chiefly. Of course, we still have the forums and such, but Discord being our home base. So basically, the solution we came up with, which was probably the only real way to go, is StarCraft is dead, Discord is alive. Instead of StarCraft being our core and the forums being our way to communicate, forums dying too is kind of a big thing. But I'm not gonna address that necessarily, because I mean, there's still forums online today that are used a lot. I think it's very finicky. Forums, it's kind of like it has to be self-sufficient. Like, if people start using them less, then people will start using them less. If people start using them more, then people will start using them more, if that makes any sense. So, the whole website debacle where we lost our domain name and such really hurt it. I don't necessarily think that the forums would be as inactive as they are if everything went perfectly. But definitely is undeniable that forums are seeing decreased use overall, and a lot of forums have closed down too. So that's something. But that aside, yes, okay. So Discord then is our new StarCraft, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's basically what we did. We said, okay, well, we don't have a game to unite us, but we have a platform. Which was always the case before, where, yeah, we were united by the forums, even across all our divisions, but many divisions turned traitor and rebelled and did all that. So StarCraft, though, was always there. Battle.net, StarCraft, multiplayer client, always there as our home base. But now it's not. So what does that mean? Well, it essentially means that Discord's going to replace it, but now we have this problem. People playing lots of games at once. So how exactly do we figure out how to organize WA with people playing lots of games at once? Well, let's get into the real meat of the lecture, and I'm going to create some hyphens here because this is what we're really talking about. So we're talking about, let's say, 2017 to 2018, this kind of time. Discord has arisen. StarCraft is dying. It's quite dead by this point. And we have people playing lots of games at once. So what do we do? Well, this is where myself, so this is the first Imperium era, so WA's leadership officers, let's see if we can even scroll back up and find a good, yeah, here. So in place of this, in fact, in place of these two, basically, we had just knights. Knights were the officers. So we had our whole group of knights. And what did we do? Well, we got everyone, all our knights together, and we talked about, okay, we need to reorganize because right now we're organized by these divisions and they're not working super well because a lot of people play lots of different games at once. There's more to it than that. Read the abridged history of WA that talks about a lot of the kind of interpersonal and drama issues that were happening this time. But broadly speaking, we felt we needed to reorganize, and we had some of these problems we were trying to deal with. So what did we come up with as knights? Well, we said, okay, essentially what I would call arbitrary chain of command units. So what are those? Well, what we settled on was what we used in the first Viking era, which was, I'll even use the rank, High King, me, great companies, and warbands. So each great company contained multiple warbands. So as this system was originally envisioned, these had no meaning. They were just a way to keep track of people. So everyone was in a warband. Let's even include that because that's crucial. Everyone is put in a warband. You can transfer between warbands with the permission of both warband leaders and the relevant great company leaders, because you could transfer across to a different great company or to just a different warband still in your same great company. Either way, the relevant great companies led by Jarls, generally speaking. Warbands varied, but generally speaking, led by Huskarls. That changed a little bit later where we started letting people who were higher ranked than Huskarls still lead a warband because we didn't want to like force people out. Like they graduate out of their warband, they're not allowed to lead it anymore. Some people didn't want to do that, which is understandable. So we changed that. But let's just say this in practice. For simplicity's sake, we'll say this. So when this started in March of 2018, we rolled this out. Arbitrary chain of command units, everyone in a warband. The idea was this was a way to keep track of people and vessel for ranks chain of command. That's the real purpose here. Because you might ask, why put everyone in a warband? What is even the point? Well, because I've already talked about the limits of the house structure, right? Limited candidate pool. It's really hard to get stuff done because you only have certain people eligible for each of these ranks. Only the people in the relevant house and family. It's hard to remove them. They don't have any specific requirements. They have these things that we would strongly advise them to do, that we'd love for them to do, but they don't do it. Sometimes. And then what do? Well, not much we can do. Okay, there's only one person in the house. They're the Lord. They're supposed to do stuff. They don't do stuff. What do? You can remove them, but that doesn't help the house at all. There's still nothing happening. So I talked about all that already. That's some of the problems with the house. So we need a system like with these ranks that we have now. Now, we had different ranks in the first Viking era, but we still had ranks, with the idea being that you can evaluate people against the requirements and duties of their rank and promote or demote them as such. And that allows this whole promotion and meritocracy system. So it's a ladder of power and responsibilities. It's exactly what it is. We used to say the respect, responsibility, and resolve is what an officer is supposed to have. It's what Warrior coined that phrase, I believe. But it's a ladder of respect and power and responsibility, generally speaking. So unlike the limitations of the house system, where it's sort of like you just inherit something or you're sort of just put into a role because you're the only one available, you're the only one eligible, and then it's kind of like, well, nothing is required of you. There's not really any consequences for not doing things. Here, you have a job, you have responsibility, you have some level of leadership or even respect, and if you want to climb up, you got to do things right. Otherwise, you're going back down. So that's the chain of command. That's the ladder of ranks, right? So we needed some way to kind of channel that, rather than just having a giant, just a clan, and people just have these ranks. Because if you don't have those units of organization, then the difference between these ranks is completely meaningless. Because it's like, okay, what is the difference between captain and commander? Captain is higher. That's the difference. What's the difference in ensign and warrant officer? Oh, I did it again. Sorry. Resize the window. Ensign and warrant officer. Ensign is higher. That's what you have, right? But if you have these units, then what it means is captains are in charge of divisions. MCPOs are in charge of platoons, or rather lieutenants are in charge of platoons. MCPOs are in charge of rep platoons, which are just small starter platoons. You can say, okay, that means the commander's the second in command of a division. Oh, okay, that means ensign's second in command of a platoon. I'm just spitballing here. But you can see that if we have that these sort of divisions for the clan, actually called great companies at the time and war bands, then it means that the ranks and chain of command have structure and meaning and purpose to some degree. We had way less ranks then. The ranks that we had varied, but generally speaking, it was Jarl, Hersir, Thane, Huskarl, Berserker, Raider, Warrior, Scout. Very Viking-esque. That's why this was called the First Viking Era. So you had Warband Leader, Great Company Leader. So it all works in practice, but the problem arose then, or the question at least, of, okay, so what is a warband? Well, it's an arbitrary unit of chain of command. So warbands by themselves don't have any real reason to exist outside of just because we have ranks, so we need a thing, right? So then we said, okay, warbands need to distinguish themselves from one another in some way. So we pushed repeatedly, said warbands, you need to pick a game that's your game. And most of them struggle to do this. Why? Because they were arbitrary units of chain of command. So you'd wind up with a bunch of people of different ranks in the same warband that played 20 different games. So how do you actually define a single game in your warband? Well, they tried to do it as they were told to. So most of them wound up saying, okay, we're the RTS warband, because it's kind of broad. And then, so you have basically them choosing genres or multiple games that they're part of, which makes sense because, again, these were initially divided up by nothing, arbitrarily, right? And then there's also trying to establish traditions, identity, purposes, anything. We had warbands make flags, essentially trying to make them not arbitrary, or at least trying to ask them to distinguish each other from one another. What did that mean in practice? In practice, it meant that, yes, some of them did to some degree, but generally speaking, they remained these arbitrary chain of command units. So what it meant And another thing is Warband. Warbands had private Warband channels, including their own roll calls, their own chat channels, and so on. And because we didn't have game channels, and this is probably hard to fathom for newer people, if you wanted to discuss StarCraft, you needed to go into the Mjolnir's Chosen channel, that specific warband, their chat. Otherwise, where would you talk about StarCraft? Nowhere. There's nobody to talk to. So if you started playing a game, you kind of needed to join that warband. Otherwise, how do you even interact with the rest of the clan who is playing the game? So there is a problem with private warband channels. Second problem, because they are private, people will say things that they would not want other people to see. Essentially trash talking other people outside of their warband and becoming more insular and so on. So having these private channels did one positive thing. Sense of belonging. You're in the cool kids club if you're in our private chat. Minus. Click. Insular. Etc. So this is problems. Problems in the first Viking era. Okay. Ben-Hur asks, what is the reservist rank for if there is demotion when the individual isn't active or isn't doing the work? Well, so we initially introduced the reservist rank as kind of a way for inactive or former members to still be a part of their house and family. Because really that should be the case. You should be kicked out of your house or family because you're inactive. They are sort of permanent. You're always part of that. So that's essentially the purpose of the reservist rank. Yes, because... So it used to be that we had it so that if you went inactive, you would just move back to guests. You actually lost like all your access to the server if you were inactive, which pushes people to be active. But it also kind of punishes people for even like real life circumstances or just whatever. So pros and cons to that as well. But basically what we try to do is say, we try to encourage people to climb the ranks and want to climb the ranks. So if you go to reservist, you are basically back at the bottom, essentially. I mean, reservist is really analogous to just recruit, more like I would call it a perma recruit rank. And you don't get access to everything in WA. You get access to most of it. You're not allowed to participate in our tournaments and events and competitions. You're not eligible for game giveaways. You're not eligible for house and family traditions. You're obviously not eligible to move on up the ranks. Is it a deal breaker for some people? Probably not. But generally speaking, that is the purpose of the reservist rank, is to kind of let you still, interact with WA in some way. But yeah, I mean, that's something we've talked about. You could talk to some of the officers and they're going to say, yeah, the reservist rank shouldn't exist because if you have the threat of being demoted to guest for being inactive, it's going to motivate people to be active more so than reservists existing as like a safety net. That might be true. I mean, again, I think it's pros and cons to either way of doing it. So yeah, so this was the way we did things in the Viking era. Now I talked about before another. To go with this theme, comparing clan organization systems. Another theme would be, or system rather, would be organized entirely by houses and families. And this is something WA has talked about doing in the past. But the chief problem with a house and family system, in fact, let's skip down and say this. This is hypothetical. It's never been done. Chief problem is lack of candidates, lack of motivation to perform duties. Which is actually goes with a question about reservists, because, yeah, I kind of really already talked about this, right? If we're talking about the clan is organized into, houses with lords and ladies in charge of a house, if they aren't doing their job, they get demoted to what rank? Well, not a lot of ranks exist. There's basically only, let me find it here. Where were we? You have lord or lady, prince or princess, earl, countess. There's like 3 ranks. Could we add additional ranks and go all full, monarchy, Germanic, knightly style? Sure. But you're still left with the problem of a limited pool of candidates to lead any given unit of organization. So only the people in that family can lead the family. Only the people in that house can be in charge of the house. So if there's no suitable candidate to lead the house, how does the clan even function? Because you can't just delete a house. If you have the system of platoons and divisions, you can close a division or a platoon down if it's not doing well and there's nobody left to lead it. You can do that. But you can't close a house or a family down. And yeah, you can demote somebody, but is there any candidate to replace them? In a small house or family? Maybe not. So you can see that's a real problem because there's no motivation for anything with houses and families because you can't really close a house or family. You can't just delete it. I guess you could, but it would really be kind of the antithesis to the whole system being about kind of permanence and history and lineage and ancestry. So you really couldn't. And yeah, you could demote somebody, but if there's nobody to replace them, then you can't really demote them. So there's not really any motivation for anyone to do a good job. So this is the problem with house family only organization. Theoretical has not been done again. Okay. So what is the alternative? What we have right now is sort of something else. It's sort of like what I mentioned earlier, which is what if all these ranks just existed in a vacuum? They pretty much do right now. Now we have divisions and platoons, right? But they're more like one or two people keeping track of things, more like overseers, not platoons. So in practice, what does that mean? Well, it means that not everyone is in a platoon. Platoons are actually just like one or two guys. And then, yeah, whoever is playing the game at the time is part of the platoon, if you will. But in that sense, I could be part of 6 different platoons at the same time, because what if I'm playing a bunch of different games? And you might say, well, that's fine, because we have this Discord problem. Where did I even write that? Yeah, Discord problem, people playing lots of games at once. So it's fine to be part of 6 platoons at once. Is it, though? Because if we say everyone has to be part of a platoon, like everyone was in a warband, then how are you part of 6 platoons? Makes no sense. They had their own channels and roll calls. So are you part of 6 different private channels? Are you part of 6 different warbands? What sense of belonging exists at that point? And if you're in charge of a platoon or a warband, how do you keep track of people when you have 6 different Huskarls, let's say, keeping track of the same person because they're in 6 different warbands? It becomes exceedingly complicated and difficult to imagine. So we have what I call Third Fleet System. What is this? Well, take our current ranks, add a couple. And you have ship. You have divisions. And you have platoons. Oh, and my capitalization is weird. Okay, so that means you have these. And everyone is in a platoon, so you can transfer between them. Platoon leaders are in charge of keeping track of the people in the platoons. Divisional leaders are in charge of keeping track of all of the platoons in their division. And then you have clan leadership, which is in charge of the whole direction and all the divisions. Pretty simple pyramid structure there. In this structure, the ranks are given even more purpose because the maximum rank that somebody leading a rough platoon or a new platoon can have is Master Chief Petty Officer. The maximum rank that somebody leading a platoon can have is Lieutenant. Let's add that. Platoon leader. Rough platoon leader. Maximum rank the leader of a division can have is Captain. So the commander is the second in command of a division. Now back then we had what we call Lieutenant Junior grade, who is the second in command of a platoon. We don't have that currently because we eliminated a couple of extra ranks. Like, these ranks are new compared to the Third Fleet era. In the Third Fleet era, we had First Class Petty Officer, Second Class Petty Officer, Third Class Petty Officer, Crewman, Cadet. A new member joined at the rank of Crewman. Cadet was like a punishment rank, or if somebody was like not trustworthy or something, basically. It was like the timeout zone. So you had these 4 ranks and Cadet. So we basically took those and said, okay, this is confusing because a first class petty officer is not technically an officer. At least in WA. So we said, okay, let's use words that do not have the word officer, that are simple. So we said, okay, let's just call a recruit. And then we have Marine, an homage to StarCraft's Terran Marine unit. And then you have Gunner and Master Gunner. So we took these from a few different kind of naval navies throughout history and around the world. So yeah, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge system, but for the most part, the rest of these are quite standard U.S. Navy ranks, with a couple of missions, of course. So we said, okay, these are going to be our new enlisted ranks, and then these are the officer ranks, because they have the word officer in them. So very straightforward for somebody to learn. But this thing, oh boy, leader. This system where a platoon leader was MCPO at max, lieutenant leader was platoon, or a lieutenant was a platoon leader. Oh, I can't talk. A platoon leader was a lieutenant at max, and a division leader was a captain at max. And a platoon leader was an MCPO at max. That created this sort of whole structure, the pyramid, basically. So yes, you're kind of stuck in your rough platoon rank if you're MCPO until if you can get your rough platoon to full platoon status, which is based on the number of people in it, generally speaking. So, this is what we're actually talking about doing, is what I'm saying right now, moving closer to the Third Fleet system. What is the benefits? Ranks have more purpose, meaning, importance. What is downside? I would say rigidity. Because if I'm in the World of Tanks platoon and I stop playing and I have to switch, well, I have to apply for a transfer. Is that the end of the world? No. But it is extra stuff you have to do that currently is not asked of people. Now, I think what we're going to do, I think generally speaking, after all the discussions, we are going to move in this direction. So we are going to ask that, or basically put everyone into a platoon. We're going to say everyone is in a platoon. Everyone is in a platoon. What if I play 12 different games? We'll try to put you in one that makes the most sense. It's not like you're only allowed to play that game because we're going to leave off some of the stuff that warbands had. We're not going to have private platoon channels. We're not even going to have a private platoon roll call. You're still going to have your same roll call. Only difference will be when you write your roll call, and I'm going to open up Discord here and I'm going to copy paste. Let's find a roll call. Here's Conungramir's roll call. I can't even see my... Okay. So here's what he posted, right? Pretty normal roll call. Very standard. Well done. What else will we add? We're going to add one more field to it. Platoon. What platoon is he in? I don't know. Let's just say Guardians of Runeterra. Randomly. League of Legends. As an example. Or maybe he's in Teutonic Order. StarCraft 2. Or maybe he's in something else. But as an example. So, probably we might simplify things. Just to, because there's a lot of lines. So, the old style that we used to do with our roll calls. Or, sorry, not with our roll calls. Well, for our roll calls, but also what we're trying to copy here is on StarCraft 1, on Battle.net, people would have to list this information in their profile. Just for record-keeping sake and so everyone knew. So what we do is House, Family, Commander, Yormling, right? And here, we'd probably, you could even do something like this. Is this what we're going to do? Get ready, copy this down? No. But what this is basically how things looked on old school StarCraft. And we're all about that. So, we very well might do a system like this. But the main piece of information that's been added is platoon. So what does this mean, which platoon he's in? All this means... So what I'm talking about here actually is... And I better add a line, because... Whereas before, in the Third Fleet system, everyone was in a platoon, and you had to transfer if you wanted to change platoons. And you were kind of stuck there. And you would be using your platoon's subforums and such. The way we wanted to adapt this is the only thing that being a platoon means is who is keeping track of your activity, roll call, who is in charge of promoting, demoting you. That's what the platoon is for, or what it would be for in the system that we are proposing. So basically, which platoon you're in, it doesn't matter a ton, but what we want is for you to be in the platoon that makes the most sense for this. So it should be somebody who knows you and or plays games with you a lot. So probably we would put you in the platoon for the game you played the most. Can you transfer? Yes, of course. That's fine. But what this will do in practice is do this. What else could it potentially do? Could eventually additionally affect your max rank. Well, this is kind of a downside, right? Maybe. Maybe not. Let's do this. Ooh, which one is it? It's Schrodinger's effect. It could be good or bad. Both at the same time. So what does that mean? Well, if we go all the way back up here and we say the maximum rank for a rough platoon leader is Master Chief Petty Officer, then if you are in a rough platoon, you can't get past the rank of Master Chief Petty Officer. Well, that stinks. Well, sure. But if you want to get higher, you need to transfer out of that platoon. Basically, that's the long and short of it. Now, what is the downside of this? No avenue for climbing ranks without leading platoon. That is a downside. But in practice, we have taken the last couple of years where there's been the opportunity for people to climb the ranks outside of the traditional platoon structure, and it has pretty much not happened. The only people that have significantly climbed the ranks have been people that were running platoons. So I think that probably it makes more sense to say that running platoons is the way to climb the ranks. And I mean, doing additional stuff outside of your assigned duties can only help you climb the ranks in general. But we're asking that people do run platoons as the primary way of doing things, because that is our primary purpose, is platoons, which are games. So our primary purpose is gaming. So therefore, our primary avenue for climbing the ranks is helping us run gaming events and organizations, which I think makes sense. Is it a downside for people that just want to do record keeping all the time? Sure, I'm one of those people. But I think the fact is that if you don't play any games, I mean, so one of the things to keep in mind as well is that we're probably going to have, because we have this issue of, let's scroll up, where is it? People playing lots of games at once. Well, okay, Teutonic Order, we have a StarCraft platoon, we have Guardians of Runeterra League of Legends platoon. What else do we have? Probably we have a miscellaneous platoon or something like that. Now, that kind of goes against this whole game organization system a little bit, but I think it's also kind of a necessity because we have people that just play some game we don't have a platoon on or don't quite fit in the other ones. And it's fine, because like I said, this is what we're talking about. So if you just, we try to find the best possible fit. So it could be that you don't play any games that anybody else really plays. So then we're just going to put you in a platoon with people that know you, or put you in some kind of miscellaneous platoon. The best possible fit. That's what we're going for here. So, again, caveat, asterisk, this system is still under construction, but this is kind of what we're looking at, direction we're going in. Okay. So probably we have all these game platoons, and we have one sort of bonus platoon, which is essentially the substitute for StarCraft way back in the day. Because it used to be StarCraft was our home base, right? Well, it still exists in the form of StarCraft 2. I mean, StarCraft 1 still exists too, but, I mean, come on. So essentially, this is going to be sort of the home base platoon for people that don't fit in the other ones. So, technically speaking, you could climb the ranks in this platoon. How would you do that? Well, because this platoon is not united by a single game, it would be more like just, eventually we'd probably put you in charge of doing the report and the review for this platoon, or perhaps you do some other stuff, like some general lineage stuff, administration stuff, record keeping, documentation stuff throughout the clan, helping me with something, stories, whatever, history. So there would be that avenue for you to climb the ranks if you don't play any of the games that we run platoons on. So that is probably what we're talking about doing. And what this does, the main benefits of this whole system that we're talking about as a whole, is that people who know you, promoting, demoting, less work for the Rear Admiral, who is in charge of doing all the review right now. That is Ulfal. He's been doing it, all of it himself for quite a while. More opportunity to try out responsibilities, duties. More power in platoon leaders' hands. That should be plural. More opportunity for leads to prove themselves. So these are the main benefits, because the question always becomes, okay, why change anything at all? These are things that we would like to see, that I would like to see. Hence why we are considering, for the average member, really, just adding that you are in a platoon to your roll call. And again, we might change the format slightly like this. I mean, just so it's not like you're writing like 500 lines. It's just a little more compact. So we might do that. We'll see. But that is the main benefits of this system that we're talking about, which is sort of an adaptation of this Third Fleet era system, which had individual platoon roll calls and subforums. What we have now is we have the game channels that are open to everybody, and those would be where these platoons are sort of centered on. The League of Legends platoon, Guardians of Runeterra, is going to be using the League of Legends chat, just like anyone else playing the game. So if you stumble upon a new game, want to try out a new game or whatever, like some people have been doing, you can just hop in that game channel, and it's right there. There's no limits. You don't have to apply for a transfer or anything. The only time you might want to apply for a transfer, or we might talk to you about a transfer, is if you used to be playing StarCraft all the time, and now you don't really play it anymore, and you've been playing League of Legends all the time. Then what might happen? Well, you might approach an officer and say, hey, I think I'd like to switch. Why would that matter? Well, because then people who know you are promoting or demoting you. Because if you stop playing StarCraft, and you're still in the StarCraft platoon, and you're playing League of Legends all the time, the guy who's in charge of the StarCraft platoon is probably going to say, this guy doesn't seem to be active at all. But based with our current activity systems, probably what he'd realize is he'd see, hey, you know, I guess I'm using Khan as the example here. Let's say he's reviewing Khan. He says, okay, Khan doesn't seem to be playing StarCraft anymore. But when I look up his stats, he's really active. But I haven't seen him on StarCraft at all. So he must be active somewhere else. So logically, you'd say, okay, well, he's active, but not in my platoon. Okay, I'm going to go look and see, oh, okay, he's really active in League of Legends now. Oh, or, you know, It might happen some other way where Khan specifically says, yeah, I'm switching games, so hey, can I get a transfer? Or it might happen where he's starting to play League of Legends now, and the leader of the League of Legends platoon is going to then go and say, hey, this guy's super active, but he's not in my platoon. I'm going to go talk to the leader of Teutonic Order, or just bring it up in the command center with the other officers and say, hey, Khan's been playing League of Legends now a lot, so shouldn't he be in that platoon? So that's kind of the idea of the system. There's a few different ways that we'd kind of catch that. So hopefully we would never have the case where just because where you're punished for switching games. So those are the main benefits for this switch, which again is not much of a switch. It's mostly just you belonging to a platoon, and the word platoon making way more sense, because again, how they are currently is like overseers, like 1 or 2 people. So that even the word platoon doesn't make much sense. So I think this is, if I do say so myself, a pretty good way of adapting the Third Fleet era system, more so than we're doing right now, for a kind of modern Discord audience. So I think that's probably what we're going to do. If you have thoughts or ideas, of course, feel free to talk to me. There's the suggestion box. You could just bring it up anytime, of course. But hopefully that both gives you an overview of kind of some of the different ways that the clan has been organized, while also talking about kind of my thinking and others' thinking in our discussions about some of the changes we want to make, which in the past, changes to WA has been sort of like a dirty word. It winds up being this huge thing. Okay, everyone's going to reorganize, your rank's going to change, etc., etc. None of that's going to change. Really, all we're majorly doing is saying, okay, now you're in charge of platoon. So instead of just being part of a giant conglomerate, a giant vague blob of people that the rear admiral is in charge of keeping track of, now we're going to divide people up into groups based largely upon what's the game they most frequently play. If they don't fit into any of that, none of that makes sense, okay, we're going to have one more kind of catch-all platoon, which hopefully will not get insanely out of control in terms of numbers. But I think it does probably make sense to have this. I think in a perfect world, yeah, we wouldn't have it. But it kind of allows for people to be part of this system, even if they don't necessarily fit into a certain game, which I think is better than just forcing them into a platoon that they don't actually fit in, because we want to have all of these opportunities for people, right? Because if we put somebody who doesn't play StarCraft in the StarCraft platoon, then the chances of them ever having this opportunity or this opportunity or this, if they don't play StarCraft, is anyone in StarCraft platoon leadership going to actually know them? Maybe not. Probably not. So it kind of invalidates all these if we just shove people into platoons who don't actually fit into them at all. Hence the benefit of a miscellaneous platoon. So I don't love it, but I think that it's probably better, again, than just throwing everyone into a platoon and not having this catch-all platoon. I don't know. We are still discussing it and working on it, so yeah. I think that's going to about do it for this lecture, though. So, yeah, hopefully we will have more lecture series. If you want to run your own lecture, do contact me. I would love to help you out with that, stream it, etc. Can be about anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be WA related. Most of mine are WA related, but you can see, I think we have an EVE one in our series on our YouTube. There's a Narian did his Middle-earth tabletop strategy battle game lecture. Can be anything. It's just sort of WA presents information on a thing. Okay. I'm going to call it there, though. Thanks, everybody, and hopefully I'll be back for more lectures before the year is out. If you do have any ideas for lecture topics you'd like to hear, do let me know as well.